Hello, everyone. We are super excited to be here at Next Flight 2023. So, welcome, Jeremy. We are super happy to have you here. My name is Alexandra Navarro. I am the Chief of Staff at Paystand. And today I have the pleasure to introduce our super rock star, Jeremy Almond, the CEO of Paystand. And Jeremy's story is super inspiring. I promise you that you guys are going to be super engaged. He comes from a Latino American background. His own mom is from Mexico. He is the first generation to go to college. And you, Jeremy, started your first company when you were a teenager. Wow, that's amazing, huh? After going to college and getting his bachelor degrees in engineering, Jeremy was part of an IPO company. That's amazing too. But in 2008, probably you all were super young, the Great Recession hits his own family, and he decided to switch a little bit his career. Jeremy was hit by the recession, and he decided to go back to school, make his MBA, and focus his career on blockchain and how or understanding why the banks failed. He started Paystand in 2013 with his very good friend Scott C. And then after so many problems with the payments, he decided to start fixing the payment problems in enterprises and also help to fix the larger economy. Today, Paystand is a $1 billion company with more than 600,000 business making payments on our network across the United States and Latin America. So Jeremy is going to help you and me to understand better more his journey with you. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, what's up, everyone? What's up, everyone from the Digital Nest crew? This program you guys are part of is just a huge near and dear to my heart because I think many of your stories are my story. And so I'm honored to be able to share a little bit of my journey and what it looks like to be able to grow from really a humble upbringing to, the opportunity to change the world. And so I think that's available for everyone. And so I get to lock arms with all of you guys and hopefully spend a little bit of time talking about my story.
That's great. I have like 15 questions. Are you ready?
No.
Of course. So get ready. All right. So, Jeremy, you usually don't share your story with many people, but the audience is great to share how inspirational your childhood was and the challenges that you faced when you were little. And I would like to ask you, where did you grow up? What was to, like being raised where you were? And also, if you can tell us a little bit about your parents, which values are still inside you?
Yeah. It's Alex is asking a question that starts off that I don't often talk about. And so this is kind of a special moment for me because I do think that my story is somewhat similar to folks in Digital Nest. I think if you're like our story, it's hard to talk about identity sometimes. Where do you come from? Where does it fit? And where do I fit in kind of the great narrative of the world? And what I hope to share is it actually turns out it can be a superpower, but you really need to embrace a lot of where your roots are. So for me, my mother's side of the family came from Mexico, and then she married like a blue collar white guy. My dad was awesome, but he was a construction worker. They worked in the fields, and really just what I'd call salt of the earth kind of people. And, I think the fact that I am so blessed and honored to be able to run a technology company now and, be part of the change agent for our economy, I would have never dreamed of when I was a kid. I thought the most likely outcome for me was, working in the fields or doing, hard labor. None of my parents went to college. My father never even went to high school. But I think what makes where we exist and live so magical, it is still the land of opportunity. And so for me, I grew up I went all over the place, but mostly in a town called Stockton, which actually is a place that I know we have a Nest location. And, it's a working class urban town. And we didn't have access to technology. My normal kind of class was I went to public schools. And quite frankly, I struggled, in the normal school system. But, I think one of the things that becomes a superpower is where there is challenges in life and where there's resiliency. This actually becomes this huge, huge superpower in the long run because it creates grit. And so growing up without much, I learned to be scrappy. I learned to be kind of entrepreneurial. And one of the things I appreciated about my parents is even though they didn't have a lot, they did encourage me that you could be anything. And so I want to encourage everybody that's involved in Digital Nest, you can be anything. It doesn't matter where you start off with, you can literally change the world. And so for me, I was lucky enough to get involved in technology when I was young. And access to a computer was my entryway out from the fields and hard labor in Stockton to access into this crazy world of Silicon Valley. And it started with one person who believed in with me, access to technology and the belief that if you just work really hard, you actually can do anything. And so, my story from there was pushed me off into college, but that it really started at 16, and it really started from 5 to 15 in Stockton, just hustling, working hard, and then believing that if you just get a break, you can go do anything.
It's amazing, right? How many of you there are related to that story, and how amazing the future could be when you believe in yourself. So let's see, Jeremy, I know that you started your first company when you were a teenager. That's kind of amazing. What can you tell our youth about what did you learn from that experience that is still helping you today? And how was that experience?
Well, okay, so I was at a first startup when I was 16. Before that, everybody's got kind of an entrepreneurial journey. So in my case, my first actual company was this paper route thing. So they don't do newspapers anymore, but back in the day, you actually delivered newspapers to people's doors. And the way that would work is you would get paid based on how many papers you delivered. And so I must have been, 12 or 13. And what I figured out was I had friends that were around in the urban city, and we were trying to figure out how to be able to, get food and help kind of pay for things. And so the paper route was for us a way to be able to get paid. I got all my friends involved, and what I learned was the power of community in that process, because one person I could deliver, papers to a neighborhood, but I got all my friends involved, and then we ended up delivering papers to all over the city, and that was like a cool way for me to learn how entrepreneurship works. It didn't require me to have access to a degree or technology or anything. It was the beginning. The next thing that happened was when I was in high school, somebody in high school believed in me. So we didn't have access to a computer at in my home. And one of the teachers in high school, I was getting in trouble a lot. Quite honestly, I was in detention a lot. And one of them just thought, oh, maybe we should get him busy. And so they gave me access to a computer, and that opened my mind up to the world of technology. And so I programmed a video game when I was, 14 or 15. And that just created this whole new world. And it was a world outside of the world I was at, which was so exciting. And so that made me kind of get hooked on this notion that I didn't have to be defined by where I was, that I could be part of something that was bigger than myself, which at that time was technology and the internet. And then the first startup I was at, I wasn't the founder of the startup, but I was one of the first early employees. And the story there was I didn't have much experience. I was 16. I was going off to college, and I was going to go be the first in my family to go to college, but it was to do a computer science degree. And I had no real job experience. I'd done waiting tables and some basic hustling. But I wanted to get an internship at a job in technology because I had to pay my way through school. And so what I did there was there were some tech companies near the college I was about to go to. And I just cold called them and I said, hey, I don't care what you need. I will take out the trash. I will, get whatever, like just whatever you need. Just I will hustle and I will work if you give me a shot. And that company was a small company, but it was one of these cool technology rides. It starts out small and becomes super huge. And so I got to enjoy the journey of that from a really, really tiny company to ultimately this kind of wild success story. And so hustle, don't be afraid, use your strengths. And then ultimately, if you're part of something great, you can be part of this bigger ride. And so I think all of those was something I was really lucky with at an early age. And a couple of people gave me a shot. But I think one thing that you have when you kind of grow up in these, adverse environments is it creates grit, right? And so use that to your advantage. Use that to your superpower.
That's amazing. Okay, so you are the first one to go to college. You are kind of a kid that gets in trouble, but you are also, it seems to me that you were kind of intelligent.
No, you're about to say I'm kind of a troublemaker also.
Yes,
so,
like both, right?
Yeah.
So I want to know, I know that story, but I think that would be great to share with them. How was that moment when you decide to go to college? Who helped you getting there? And that story with your score test, do you want to share that? Like, how was that switch from you to wanting to go to college to wanting to go there?
Yeah. I think college, if you don't have a family environment who's done it, is kind of a scary thing. And it is a moment where you can have the opportunity to change, but that can be scary, especially if you don't have an awareness of what you're moving to. And so in my case, going from Stockton to I had the opportunity to go to a number of pretty competitive universities, and I think I had fear, to be honest, on like to go to, I don't know, a rich kid school or a hippie school or like a competitive school. And what I think I would say is embrace the change, but also be true to who you are. And so in my case, I could have gone to the top school. I ended up choosing to go to a school that I really felt closely akin to, with a good university and good engineering program. And what that did for me was it took me out of an environment and was a fresh start. So as a kid who got in a bit of a trouble, as a kid who was kind of looking for opportunity, to go to a place, which in this case, I ended up going to UC Santa Barbara. That's a beach community. There's a little bit of a tech scene. It's wildly different than Stockton was. And it gave me this fresh start. And it gave me this moment to be able to, when I started working in tech, to define what are my superpowers, and to define what do I love, and to define my ability to kind of create my own story. And so I just want to encourage like everybody in the nest, don't just let your past define you. Embrace the things that make you stronger. I was so much stronger. I didn't realize this at the time, but so many kids who had so much handouts, like they were just expecting things to fall from the sky. They were expecting, internship to magically happen. Grades came easy for them. They had cars and everything paid for. I had to work through school. I had to work full time during engineering school. But what that did for me was that allowed me to lean into where my story was strong, and then it allows you to kind of jump from your superpower. And so I ended up doing a startup full time while I was doing engineering school, and that startup kind of grew quite wildly and quite successfully. And then I also was, between that and being in school, that kept me pretty busy and kept me a little bit less out of trouble. So that was nice too.
That was great for you. Have you talked to your teacher since then?
Well, the funny story about this is, so if you ever feel like you are, maybe a little different, or maybe your teachers don't understand you, or things like that. I was, one of the things that happened was I was in my high school, I was bused to this better high school than where my neighborhood was. And I was in some classes that I actually was kind of the odd person out. They were AP classes or whatever. And I remember the teachers didn't like me that much. I had some that were advocates, but others that were like, what are you doing here? And I ended up writing my college story, my written story, around one of the teachers who basically hated me. And in retrospect, I don't know, maybe that wasn't the best thing to do, but it was important to me to talk about like overcoming adversity, that it didn't matter that a teacher didn't think I belonged in that class. I was going to prove them wrong differently. I remember that teacher like was so hard on me. And so that A in AP English meant way more to me than, I don't know, another class like, math or something that was easier for me, because I wanted to prove them wrong. And I think, again, that's kind of one of the things that adverse backgrounds does, is it does pull up in you and this notion that like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And so when I went into college, I had this notion, which my entrance exams was talking about, which is, hey, look, like, I don't need to be defined by my history. I'm going to define it by what I do. And so I think that's actually what makes technology and entrepreneurship so exciting, is it's actually defined not by what you say, but what you do. And that starts from a very early age. And so I actually think people in the nest will be the next great entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's amazing, Jerry. What made you? So when I see that that you start in technology, you are entrepreneur. What was inside? What was driving you, or which problem were you trying to solve, or what passion or fire was inside you to become who you are right now? Technology, entrepreneurship, thriving through your past, getting into your future. What was that fire inside you? What problem were you trying to solve?
Well, when you're young, I don't think you know. I certainly do now, but when you're young and you come from this kind of background, it's not like you go, oh, I get to choose anything I want in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things I would just encourage everybody at the nest around is find what you are passionate about, because where you are passionate, and if you do that, and where you fall in love with, you're going to be great at. Because if you have grit and resiliency and the one ability to prove somebody wrong, and then you have passion, man, that's an unstoppable thing. And so for me, I think the first thing I fell in love with was technology, because it was a little bit of a window to something else. And the view that, technology at its best, you get to imagine the world not as it is, but as it could be. And so I think technology was this kind of magic ride for me to see it can change your economic situation, but it also can change how the world works. And so that's pretty cool if you're a kid with a chip on your shoulder. So I think I first fell in love with what technology could do. And so it's why I'm such a believer in STEM and science and technology and engineering, math, because it does move the world forward. It does dent the world forward. And your imagination is your limit, your imagination and your ability to execute. But the second thing I would say is, once you do that, then you have the ability to, a little bit farther down in your career, start going, well, what can I use those superpowers for? So in my case, financial services became really important because, if you grow up with little things like financial inclusion and how does money affect our economy and how do you create more jobs and how do you uplift and make people in a different environment, like all of those things are really compelling. And you, again, can take your background and turn those into superpowers and change the world in ways that your story says, boy, I want the world to look a little different.
Well, that's incredible, because you knew what you wanted to do. You were driven by technology, financial inclusion, your situation, but definitely not everybody has the same lucky shot to go to University of Santa Barbara, because, come on, that's amazing, right? Who do you remember that helped you to get what you were? I know that you were very self-driven, but who helped you to encourage you to get to the next steps? Foundation for the youth at the nest to be surrounded by to get your current situation.
Yeah. I know that sometimes it can feel like life is hard, right? And so it's one thing, that you might have to work harder. You might have to be on the bus longer. I had to be on a bus for like 2 hours a day. And so on one hand, you can look at those things. On the other hand, oftentimes in life, you get these moments where somebody might give you a shot. And so what I would say is, when somebody believes in you, embrace that completely and look for those people. So I was lucky, even though my dad never went to college, he definitely believed in me and said I could do anything. He didn't know what that meant. What college, what was engineering, what was technology was pretty far from him. But I think having somebody who just is in your corner is really important. And so I hope, most of the kids do. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's successful. Just having someone in your corner telling you can do it means all the world. The second thing, though, is if you do have somebody who's in your corner, so if you are in the nest, that is an opportunity not everybody gets. And so I remember distinctly in high school, there was somebody who gave me a shot, who gave me access to a computer and said, why don't you try that? And I could have not done anything, but instead I did. I said, look, this might be my ticket out. Let me go figure this out. And so I really embraced that opportunity for somebody to say, hey, you're not necessarily, this troublemaking kid in these classes who doesn't deserve to be. I want to give you a shot. And so I think that meant the world to me. And then in college when, the startup I was at, it was kind of twofold. I had to put the work in because I had to literally cold call them and say, hey, would you give me a shot to let me be an intern? And I will do whatever it takes. So I had to do that. But the person on the other end made a bet on me, because who was I? I was a 16, 17-year-old troublemaking kid who, I was supposed to go to college, but I had no experience in tech really. And so that person gave me a shot. And I worked my darndest to make sure that I made that person look good. And there was a point actually where I was probably 2 years in, where I was having a little bit of a transition. The company was becoming successful, and I still had some of my past and a little bit of my chip on my shoulder. And that person actually later on came aside me and said, hey, dude, do you want to be where you're going or where you were? And really encouraged me to embrace kind of the opportunity. And so I remember those moments because people give you a shot, and then it's up to you to kind of embrace them.
Yeah, do you want to share a little bit about how that person told you need to change? What did you need to change?
Well, a couple of things. I was, if you're a rowdy, troublemaking kid, sometimes that doesn't work in polite society. So yeah, there's an ability of okay, you have a superpower, but you might be a little rough around the edges. So I'm still a little rough around the edges, but I still am. Well, I think I am, right?
yeah, a little bit.
But that can be a superpower because now I am like a change agent, right? I want to be a revolutionary. I want to change the world, but I want to do it in a way that is a bridge. So now I think about those as a bridge, not as somebody who burns the bridge. And so that person actually was like, hey, you can't go and just go head to head with people all the time. Hey, you can't talk like that. What worked where you grew up, that doesn't work at a company setting. So I mean, it sounds so simple now, but that was oh, all right. I've got a chance. I've got a shot. Maybe don't, maybe I can still be me, but at the same time, I can embrace this opportunity. And so, I'm really thankful for people like that to be able to hold me a little accountable too.
It's a good point that it leads me to the next question, Jeremy, that is, soft skills are very important, and soft skills are not only how is your communication or problem solving, but it's also believing in you, being resilient, being who you are, but also understanding what the company where you are going to work with they need. So what will be your recommendation for them or for anyone who wants to work in the fintech world? What experience, what tech skills they need? What will be your general recommendation for the youth?
Yeah. Again, you guys have superpowers you might not even know. So if you think about it, in the world, the world is moving so fast. It's actually accelerating how fast it works. Technology is every day there's something new. This is so cool because quite honestly, you could be some fancy executive at some company, but you actually can't keep up. In fact, I know for a fact, we work with banks sometimes or kind of older school companies. They have to ask their kids how something works. Yeah. So what I would say is you have you're digitally native right now. Things like, I don't know, ChatGPT and AI or Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, like these are things you understand maybe easier than somebody who's twice your age, who's in the business world. So you actually can use that as an advantage. So like for me, I'm now getting a little older. Like 20 years ago when I got first started in tech, there were businesses, they didn't understand how the internet worked. Like they didn't understand how, like what that would do to the company, what that would do to technology. So even though I was 16, 17, 18, I actually knew more about like programming, the internet, technology than they do because I was willing to learn it. And it was super interesting to me. And they're so used to how things are, it's really hard to see how things could be different. And so, at your age, you're really pliable. You're aware of what's going on, what's changing, and you're not stuck in your ways. So your ability to bring that to companies is actually really, really powerful. So today that could be AI, it could be cryptocurrency, it could be Bitcoin, it could be blockchain. There's so much happening right now that you can bring to the table. Create usable, measurable skills. Go at the nest, use the computers, learn these things, because the reality is somebody twice your age might not actually know them. And so that is actually a really easy way to get an entry into these kinds of companies.
Yeah, that's true. How would you explain to them the use of, if they want to work for us at Paystand, how would you explain to them what they need to work with us at Paystand or to get into an intern?
Well, like I would say, I would pick things that are at the front edge that you can learn. So in the Paystand's case, for example, we are the largest, fastest growing business-to-business payment network. And we're built on something called the blockchain. Well, the blockchain is built based on something called Bitcoin. I'm wearing a cool hat. I got it down in El Salvador. And the reality is, like, I believe Bitcoin can actually change the world. It creates financial inclusion. It's a monetary system and a monetary network that is as big as the internet. It democratizes and opens up access to banking where most people don't have it. But it's also kind of a confusing topic. But anybody can access it. You don't have to have a bank account. You don't have to have access to credit. Anybody can use Bitcoin today. And the reality is, most people don't understand how it works. So here's an example of how you as a youth can actually be ahead of people twice your age. You can go down, you can download a wallet in Bitcoin. You can use a Moon wallet. You can use Coinbase. There's various ways you can learning how Bitcoin works. And then you can start learning what are the principles behind it. And then you can start using it, activating it. You might be able to, if you're really kind of on the edge, you could start doing some programming with it. And the reality is, it's one of the largest economies in the world today. I believe it's going to change the world. And the level of people who actually can program in this new kind of financial system of Bitcoin and smart contracts actually is really, really small. And so there's no reason why an 18-year-old can't hustle, learn a topic like Bitcoin way, way easier than a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, or 60-year-old. You're inheriting the economy.
Wow. So we have one more question before going to Q&A. And we were in Guatemala last week, you and me, seeing how circular economies in underrepresented communities are being really hit by the great impact of Bitcoin. How do you see the youth at the nest, which is essentially right now in Central Valley and in the Bay Area in underrepresented communities, can learn or can have social and financial inclusion with the use of Bitcoin or in general with blockchain?
Yeah. Again, I think this is like a superpower you guys have. So you understand probably more than some tech executive in Silicon Valley why financial inclusion actually matters. The reality is, whether you're an immigrant, whether you are in places like Mexico or El Salvador, like your access to banking is actually much less than a typical, middle-class American. And so what they might think of is that there's not a problem. You actually realize there is a problem. It's hard to send remittance back and forth between the US and El Salvador, for example. It costs is super expensive. There's payday loans. There's a bunch of things that are super unfair about it. And so the notion that there's a financial system and a monetary network that anybody can get access to. You don't have to have citizenship. You don't have to have a bank account. You don't have to have a credit account. You don't have to have anything. You can just literally sign up. That is as revolutionary as the notion that anybody could access the internet 20 years ago. Because before that, the only people who had access to communication was big media. And so what I would say is this is a tool for change. It is the ability to create a economic growth. If your parents don't have the ability to save money, how do they ever grow out of their current situation? If the family that you send money back to in Mexico is unfairly gotten fees or other people are robbing them, that's not cool either, right? And so the notion that there's a system that's outside of the system that anyone can access is completely revolutionary. And it's really an enablement agent. That enablement agent is, hey, if you give somebody access to financial fairness, if you give them access to financial inclusion, then you've taught them technology, you've taught them savings, you've taught them financial literacy, and you've given people upward mobility, because if they can save and they can invest, they can actually grow. So this is a huge seed for change that anyone can access. But I actually think that people who come from immigrant communities and immigrant families and underrepresented understand it better than most. So you are the tip of the spear now.
That's true, Jeremy. It was amazing to see how in a tiny, tiny town in Guatemala and in Salvador, all the businesses were making their transactions in Bitcoin in a simple wallet. How little kids, remember the school that we went to visit? Little kids were learning about financial inclusion, about how to do transactions, about how the economy can impact with inflation, and how the entire town is based on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is more than cryptocurrency. As you always said, blockchain is the Web 3.0. This is how you call it?
Yeah, blockchain is this enabling technology for financial systems. But Bitcoin is actually the money that can change the world.
Exactly. So this is an invitation. And well, Jeremy, I think that we are out of time. I can read the screen right now, but I think, Sandy, that you said that we should open now to questions for Jeremy. So we have like 5 minutes for questions. I'll be taking some here, but I'm going to try to read the computer. So sorry if I am too close to the camera. I just want to see here. Okay. All right. So here the first question. What has been the biggest lesson learned from being the CEO of Paystand, Jeremy?
The CEO sounds like a fancy job. But I'd say the biggest lesson learned was the same lesson I talked about when I was an intern at the first startup. So I have my coffee right here. But my job as an intern when I was 16 or 17 at the startup was to do whatever it took to help make the company work. Official role was to get coffee and stuff like that for folks. But I think about being the CEO of, 400 or 500 employees now. That's still my job. I believe in something called servant leadership, which is if you serve the people around you and your main role is to enable them to succeed, the company will succeed. And so the lessons I learned as an intern, the lessons I learned as someone who's had a resilient background and had to create grit, I think become really important as a CEO, because we all hear stories about CEOs that are not great. They care about money, power, or fame. And while those things are okay, you actually really care about purpose and impact, because if you get lucky enough to be able to have this crazy ride like I am, you want to really give back and you really do want to change the world. I think that's one of the things that as a nested person, you will, you bleed it in your heart and on your chest in some ways. And so leadership is doing that, is putting others first, is getting coffee for others, is doing whatever it takes. And you do that at scale, because if you demonstrate that to others, then that's the culture you create. And so my job is the same now as it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I see you drinking coffee. Okay. Is there a quote or words of wisdom that you each live by, that you live by?
So there's on my old office, there's something up on the wall, which is a long quote that I'm not going to be able to fully say, but it's this story from Teddy Roosevelt, which was kind of a wartime president back in the early 1900s, and he talks about, it's called Man in the Arena. So you can look it up. It's not a very long, it's kind of almost a poem. And what he talks about is, there are going to be spectators that talk about all of the things you need to do. There are spectators about all the things you can be, you should be. And those could be all in your life, right? Like, what are your expectations, your parents, your teachers, your friends, right? Everyone is going to talk about things. But what actually matters is the person who's in the arena with their blood and sweat and toil, trying to actually fight the real fight. And so I think about that because the person in the arena, the criticism doesn't matter. If you're actually doing the work, that work is what matters. So, I think I try to live my life by that. It's not words that matter, it's actions that matter. And I think the man in the arena kind of as a metaphor becomes incredibly, meaningful for me. So.
But I want to add something to that question because I see the art that you have here in the office. What is the art that I see that you can see being for you? Banksy inspire you?
Oh my. Okay. Well, I'm a big fan of Banksy. So Banksy is a street artist, right? And again, kind of is a little bit of my backstory. As I love kind of these creative things that come out of the urban environment. I think I feel some akin to it. And what he's well known for is, he goes all over the world. He's totally anonymous, but he does these street arts in these places that are social commentary. And the notion is it's basically revolutionary commentary on how we need to change the system, but in a way that is peaceful revolution, right? The notion that by my art, in his case, I can make statement for change. By my actions, I can make statement for change. In technology, by my way, I want to move the world a little bit different, can be a statement for change. In Bitcoin, by my actions to change how finances work, that is a statement for change. So I'm a big believer in that we all can be change agents and help create and inform and make the world we want. And especially if you have an adverse background, you have a pretty clear view on a world that you think could be a little better, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So go and check Banksy. It's very inspirational. So I see that we have another question here that the last question, 90% of the tech companies are very hard to reach by cold calls. How can we adapt to these issues? That's true. I mean, it's hard to call the company and say, I'm interested to call you. What are your thoughts on that for the kids?
Yeah, it is hard. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old, so I do think. So look, if you work at Paystand even after college, like as a salesperson, like you do 100 calls a day before you talk to one or two people, and so that's really hard. So again, here's your superpower. That's super hard for somebody who's got like a silver spoon entitled kind of background, but somebody who's a hustler, like you're like, yeah. I want to hear 2 yeses, not like I don't care about the 98 no's. I want to hear 2 yeses. So yeah, it is hard. That's not a bug. But what I would say is you as a digital nest person actually probably have a better shot at it than other people. So one, just never discount the power of hustle. It may not literally mean call. You may have to email. You may have to LinkedIn. There's lots of ways to get to people. But you do need to work at it. Nobody's going to give you anything on a plate. But again, this is back to your superpower. Second thing I would say is internships do really matter. And I know Digital Nest helps with that, has connections to it. So again, some fancy kid might come out of some fancy school and just expect the job to just magically appear. That's not how the world works. I actually think people in the Nest are more equipped with it because be humble, go take the internship, do whatever they ask, be willing to put in the work. And if you are, I can guarantee you're going to shine a bunch of people. And so internships aren't easy to get. Internships are hard because I know a lot of you are, I was working a job. I was working a job as a waiter. I was, doing my AP classes and college courses. It's super freaking hard. But if you put that work in, man, you don't grow without pain. So that pain and that growth actually puts you in a place that most aren't. So yeah, get an internship, work your butt off, make the calls, and you're gonna be set up for success in ways that most kids won't. So
That's a good one. All right, let's see. I think that they are putting me on the spot saying that I should stop now. Yes, it wasn't time, Jeremy. We made it.
What? All right, good job keeping time.
You see, as always. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Thank you, Jeremy, for being with the Nest. You all know that you are in my heart. I was part of the Nest for more than 6 years. I am still a nester. When you become a Nest, you are a nester forever. And if you guys are looking for an intern, for opportunities, for a mentor, we're here to support all of you. Passing back to you, Amber.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy and Alexandra, for being here. And Jeremy, for sharing your amazing story, accomplishments, and advice with us. I did not know you were also from Stockton. So that is really awesome news to hear. Us Stocktonians are doing all right. I love that. So for folks, if you enjoyed that, please join me in giving them a round of applause. I know, give them some love in the chat. I'm seeing all those thank yous, and thank you for your time. Yes, thank you all so much for giving appreciation to our awesome speakers. I know that they're always really excited. They're just as excited to see all of you as you are to hear them. Awesome. So next up, we do have our workshop, which is called The Power of Networking with Jennifer Elena Romano. This is really exciting. As I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier in my own introduction, networking can be extremely important. And I think, a couple of us, including myself, have talked about the power of a cold email, a cold connection. But as somebody earlier alluded in the chat, I don't remember who it was, those aren't actually always super easy. But one thing I can tell you is that as certain connections tend to be a little bit harder, it's your network that can really help open doors for you. So you all are in for a treat for Jennifer Elena Romano to speak a little bit more with you all about how you all can utilize the power of networking. So a little bit about Jennifer. Jennifer is the founder of Jelena Group and a co-founder of Cura. She's a compassionate and dynamic leader in brand, corporate communications, and marketing who is deeply committed to social impact, diversity, and entrepreneurship. Most recently, she launched Cura, a platform for purpose-driven career growth. That's exactly what we want here. Jen has spent her career educating and empowering the Latinx community through financial, tech, and mental health education. Her consulting agency has even helped nonprofits and brands like Google, Chase, Stanford, the Crisis Text Line, and many more large-scale education campaigns and movements. They have been recognized with awards including PRSA's Best Consumer Education for Financial Education, Wells Fargo, PR Week's Best in Multicultural Marketing for Google, Marcom's Best Latino Education Campaign, Financial Education Mass Mutual, and PRSA's Best Large-Scale Consumer Education Campaign for National Association of Broadcasters and the Digital Television Transition. Jennifer, as you can already tell by this short introduction, is a true trailblazer in her field. Her dedication to social impact, diversity, and entrepreneurship sets her apart as a leader and someone who is unafraid to tackle large societal challenges and make hard things happen. So we're really excited to welcome Jen and Elena soon to our group, and we're really excited for you all to continue to work with her. And I'll just do a quick shout out because I see people still coming out here with their pride, their pride for Stockton. So thank you so much. And in just a short moment, we will have Jennifer Elena to join us here on stage. And while we're waiting for her to come on, if you want, go refill your cup of water, your cafecito, whatever it is that you need right now. All right. Thank you.